Hello again, Gooners. Have I got some good news for you? Not really. I forgot my red and yellow and green cards. And yeah, I've got some news on the transfer front. I'll bring you that very shortly. But first of all, I'll set the quiz question. It's going to be a short one because I'm in the early hours of the day, of the following day. I don't know what happened there. Let's not go there. But talking about bad boys, two bad boys of the tour 1977, I believe. Around about the time Terry Neill was in charge, going to be discussing that in the Phil Saw and Martin Tyler book. Two bad boys on tour. We went to Australia, played against Red Star Belgrade and Celtic. Who were those two bad boys? They were named and shamed in the press. One was sold to another club. Who was that club it was that player was sold to? Who were the players, obviously? That's question one. Who were the two players? Question two. One of the players was sold to which club? And third question, how much for? I'm going to answer that when I do my little kind of Jackanory section. Should copyright that. Oh no, somebody already come up with that idea. I'll tell you what, talking about Jackanories, what about the transfer news? Well, there's a lot of stories going around, as always, and Santi Cazorla's not a story, it's much more than that. He's obviously... So many people have spotted him now, training with the team with Robin Van Persie. Who's Robin Van Persie? I'm not sure. Perhaps we might sign him. Who knows? But Santi Cazorla looks like we've signed him. But the club have not notified anyone officially just yet. So at the moment we have to, come up with our own ideas about how much it was for. It could be a record undisclosed fee. All our transfer fees are undisclosed nowadays, but the transfer fee being talked about is £18 million. Except by the Daily Mail, they say it's £16.5 million. So, who's not in Cologne? Sebastian Scalacci's not in Cologne, so that means he's on the way out, doesn't it? Doesn't it mean that? Or perhaps Nicholas Bentner, he's on the way out if he can stop suffering from... Let me read this out because it's a tricky one. Nicholas Bentner, apparently, according to Twitter, is suffering from agalmatophilia. Agalmatophilia, which means an attraction, a very unhealthy attraction to mannequins. I have to admit, if Nicholas is listening to this, which I very much doubt, Nicholas, I suffer from something similar. It's not quite the same. What I do, and it's to the acute embarrassment of my kids, I do talk to mannequins occasionally. I ask them, what they're doing tonight, that kind of thing. Yeah, if I get bored, I do that, and it's happened. Yeah, I admit that, but it doesn't go beyond that. It's just a chat. I just chat with mannequins, kind of like what I'm doing now. So there's not a lot of difference. But Santi Cazorla hasn't been chatting to the press. I'd love him to, because that would mean he's finally signed for Arsenal. That's not happened yet. Nuri Sahin also hasn't yet signed for us on loan. But John Cross reckons, and John Cross is a well-respected journalist, of course, is featured in the Gooner, the online Gooner, the podcast. He's been on that, and he's very well-respected amongst Arsenal fans. He says that Nuri Sahin, if he does sign, it means... Or it could mean, he didn't say it does mean, he said it could mean the end of Alex Song's era at the club. And I don't necessarily think that would be such a bad thing, because Alex Song, he is a very good player. I've never thought he was a bad player, even when people were getting on his back. I thought he's a very good player, but he's not a great. To me, he's not a great Arsenal player. Nuri Sahin could be a great, perhaps he could. He's got something to prove, and let's hope he does prove it at Arsenal if he does indeed sign. Alex Song, if he does leave, I'd expect £12 million. Some people say we need 20 million. Personally, I'd let him go for 12. Ibrahim Afellay has been heavily linked with us, and he's been linked with us once again. One problem, though. He's been linked with about 6 or 7 other clubs. Those clubs include AC Milan, Inter Milan, Lazio, Fiorentina. That's 4 in Italy. Borussia Dortmund, so 1 in Germany, making 5. Lille of France, Liverpool, and ourselves. So it's round about 6 or 7 plus us. Andrei Arshavin's not been linked with so many. Fulham, QPR, and now Galatasaray, not for the first time. Apparently they're offering £4 million. We want £7 million. So still a lot of talking to be done before that deal can go through. But if we let him go, we save ourselves £70,000 per week in wages. I love Arshavin. I'm not going to keep saying it. It's boring. But looks like Wenger doesn't. So he's got to go, I suppose. I'm so upset about it, I might even burst into tears. No, I won't. I'll hold myself together. But Andrei Arshavin, yes, it would make more sense to sell him abroad. Obviously, if we're going to get 4 million, that's about 3 million more than Fulham are prepared to pay from what we're hearing. And, well, I did mention the Cologne tour. It's hardly a tour, is it? It's just one match. But Serge Gnabry, the 17-year-old winger, has also been included in the squad, as has Nico Yanaris, who did very well in the Far East. So good luck to those two. And also good luck to those of you thinking that we might have a cat's chance in hell of signing Matthias Suarez. It's not that we don't have a chance, I just don't think we're interested in this Argentinian forward. But we've had a good look at him, haven't we? Because he did play for Anderlecht in the pre-season game at Southampton, or did he? If he did play, I don't remember him, so that means we probably won't sign him, will we? But anyway, he failed a medical at CSKA, and that hardly stands him in good stead, does it, for a move to Arsenal? So he didn't make it at CSKA Moscow, even though a move was agreed between Anderlecht and CSKA, £11.3 million being the transfer fee. Rather a lot of money for a player that's got allegedly dodgy ligaments, or I'm just making stuff up here because I don't know what he actually found the medical for what reason. Perhaps he didn't turn up. Perhaps he did a sort of Rio Ferdinand and didn't turn up for it. Anyway, he was player of the year, so he didn't do too badly, so that kind of gives you the opposite idea. He played 35 league games, scoring 13 goals and setting up 16. I like these stats. And in Europe, 10 games, 7 goals and 3 assists. Very good stats indeed. So I won't be disappointed if we sign Matthias Suarez. When I looked at the headline, I thought it was the other Suarez, Luis Suarez of Liverpool. But of course, Liverpool are interested because they want to link the two Suarezes together to make a Suarez special at Anfield. See what I mean? That's why I don't believe it. Do I believe Alisher Usmanov, who says that politics hampers our transfer business? Well, not if we sign Santi Cazorla finally and Nuri Sahin. That would make 4 excellent signings. So I'd have to say Usmanov red card, but I haven't got my red card, so I can't say it. And notice the word hampers. Why do we always think of words like hampers when we think of Alisher Usmanov? I'll say no more on that subject. Instead, I'll move swiftly on to talk about the two bad boys of 1977. And of course, it's always nice to go back in time. We can reflect on stuff, and it's just I like doing this in pre-season, especially in pre-season. During the season, I probably won't have time to do this, so enjoy it while it lasts, because it won't last that long. But this particular podcast could last quite a long time, I'll be honest with you, especially if I can't find my place, and that's the situation I'm in right now. I'm looking desperately, trying to find where do I start. Oh yes, we were talking about. Who were we talking about? Terry Neill, right? Terry Neill has now been appointed as Arsenal boss. So, let's go back and start at the beginning. Terry Neill had given Arsenal 11 years good service from 1959 when he joined them from Bangor in Northern Ireland as an enthusiastic 17-year-old wing half. Billy Wright was to switch him successfully to centre-half, and in 241 league games until he lost his place to Frank McClintock, Terry Neill, who also had a spell as PFA chairman, proved a strong, intelligent and uncompromising opponent who could be physical or skillful as the situation demanded. He was good enough to play for Northern Ireland at 18, and he kept his place 12 years, winning 59 caps, and in the latter years acting as player-manager. One of his most memorable moments was to score the winning goal against England in his 50th international. He was obvious management material and cut his teeth in 4 years as player-manager at Hull City until 1974, when at 32 he succeeded Bill Nicholson as Tottenham's youngest manager, a distinction he also holds for Arsenal. In his brief 2-year reign at Spurs, he never enjoyed a close or happy relationship with a rather distant board headed by Sidney Wale. Well, Kel Supri there. Of course, George Graham suffered the same kind of thing. Good manager, George Graham, no one could dispute that, but Spurs just didn't appreciate what they had. And obviously the same applied to Terry Neill. So, there were no major disagreements at Spurs, but a series of incidents led Terry Neill to believe they did not have the drive or ambition to make Tottenham a great club again. So when the offer came to take over at Highbury, Terry Neill jumped at the chance. I think he would have done anyway, despite the obvious difficulties, particularly that of coming back in charge of old playing colleagues. Yeah, I suppose that could be a problem. But Terry Neill was very gifted in terms of chat. I can't forget about that. I mean, just listening to him talk, you kind of, the Irish charm really came through. So, a one-club man in his Major League playing days. Major League makes him sound American, but he wasn't. Terry Neill had been seduced by Arsenal's history and reputation. I don't know what's wrong with my headphones. They keep slipping off, but this is sidetracking me somewhat. Anyway, when Terry Neill left Highbury in 1970 for Hull City, he had, not surprisingly, nursed a secret ambition to come back and manage the club. Bit like the secret we found out about Nicholas Bentner today, hey? Highbury needed a shake-up, and with the full backing of Dennis Hillwood, not Peter Hillwood, I think, affectionately known to him as the Old Man, Terry Neill was the man to do it. His reign was to be studied with spectacular and often successful raids in the transfer market and much publicised disagreements with some of his difficult players. But the club was never out of the headlines, and the majority were favourable to Arsenal FC. Not surprisingly, he brought his number 2, Wilf Dixon from Spurs, and Bobby Campbell, his position untenable, left within a couple of weeks. Alan Ball, who led the dressing room faction in favour of the coach, lasted 6 months, in which he never saw eye to eye with Terry Neill, and to whom he was his usual outspoken self, albeit very high-pitched outspoken self. I don't agree with you, Terry, I don't. Right, let's get back to it. In December, after being linked with Stoke City, Norwich City, and his first club, Blackpool, Alan Ball joined Southampton for £60,000, and he became Laurie McMenamin's right-hand man as they rebuilt the 1976 Cup-winning side into a lasting First Division outfit. Brian Kidd had joined Manchester City days before Terry Neill's arrival, and Terry Neill's first task was to replace him with a big-name personality. Much to his surprise, Malcolm MacDonald, near-legendary Supermac of Tyneside and the Geordies' biggest idol since Jackie Milburn, offered him the perfect opportunity to launch his reign with a spectacular transfer raid. And wow, what a coup that was, I have to say. I was so delighted when we signed Malcolm MacDonald. MacDonald, originally a fullback who had been turned into a swashbuckling centre-forward at Fulham and Luton Town, had crossed swords with Newcastle manager Gordon Lee, who was to go down in the eyes of their fans never recover as the villain who sold Supermac. Terry Neill's biggest problem was not to persuade Newcastle to part with the England international, but to keep him out of the clutches of our biggest rivals, Spurs. Keith Birkinshaw, their new manager in succession to Terry Neill, had admired the centre-forward's qualities when he was coach at Newcastle. For that reason, Arsenal hired a private plane to whisk Malcolm MacDonald south to put his signature to a £333,333 transfer. MacDonald was a larger-than-life character desperately needed at Highbury, where average gates of 40,000 fans in the double year had now dropped to 27,000 fans. It's hard to imagine. He arrived with a boast that he would score 30 goals in his first season, and was almost as good as his word, grabbing 29 and missing a penalty which would have given him his target. He was also to have a positive effect on the career of Frank Stapleton, who first played alongside him in the second game of the 76-77 season in place of John Radford. This shy but determined man from Dublin had shown great heading ability and was proving brave as a lion. He worked hard to dispel doubts about his pace and control in partnership with Supermac and later Alan Sunderland, and during the next 2 seasons he was to mature into the best all-round centre-forward in Britain. Terry Neill's reign took off like a roller coaster. It was a time of highs and lows, comings and goings, but when Chelsea were beaten 2-1 in the 4th round of the Football League Cup in front of 52,000 at Highbury in October, there was real belief the club had finally turned the corner for the better. By the end of the season, there were only 2 members of the double side still playing in the first team. Fullback Pat Rice, the longest-serving player, and the longest-serving player George Armstrong. The little winger, a man who had given 100% to the Arsenal cause for so many years, was at loggerheads with the new manager, and there was a running battle between them for the whole season because George Armstrong was anxious to make a good move to see him through to the end of his career. He eventually got his wish the next summer after playing the last of his 500 games for the Gunners against Manchester United at Old Trafford in the concluding game of the campaign. But this time it was sad that he seemed to leave for Leicester City with a hint of bitterness. Yes, of course, George Armstrong was a legend, and I saw him play quite a lot of times. And yes, he was one of the best wingers I've probably seen. But yeah, very sad that he left. John Radford, meanwhile, at 29 years of age, was also close to the end of a distinguished career at the top, and Arsenal were unable to hold Frank Stapleton back any longer. So John Radford moved to West Ham for £80,000 in December, and this down-to-earth Yorkshireman with a dry sense of humour had clearly proved to be one of the best investments Arsenal had ever made. All he had cost Billy Wright as a 15-year-old in 1964 was a £10 signing-on fee and the train fare to London from Radford's home in the mining town of Hemsworth. He went on to play 383 league games and score 111 goals. 21 of them came in the double year, as he and the young Ray Kennedy became one of the most effective scoring double acts, literally, of the post-war football. For all his success at club level, Raddy was greatly underrated and worth more than the 2 caps he won for England. In many quarters, he is still regarded as a better all-round player than his highly individualistic successor, Malcolm MacDonald. Not sure I agree with that, but John Radford, great player as well. Peter Storey was given another chance by Terry Neill to try to save his career and shake off his problems outside the game, which already involved brushes with the law. But although he worked hard to gain his fitness, he was unable to hold down a first-team place and moved to Fulham for £10,000. After only a handful of games at Craven Cottage, he was to announce his retirement at 32 after 501 appearances for Arsenal and 17 for the second division club. It was a quiet and sad departure for one of the most controversial but successful figures of the 1970s. Eddie Kelly was still only 25, but had never quite fulfilled the promise he had shown as a teenager when he burst into the double side as an all-action midfield man with a taste for spectacular shooting. He had also suffered badly over the captaincy dilemma involving Alan Ball and was happy to move and join Frank McClintock at Queen's Park Rangers. Of Bertie Mee's later signings, Terry Neill showed his astuteness in the transfer market by recouping £135,000 from Aston Villa for Alex Cropley, while Mancini, who knew his days were numbered, Terry Mancini of course that is, moved to Aldershot. That's a bit of a come down after his brief but successful mission for Arsenal in 52 league games. Terry Neill's first choice to fill the gap by Terry Mancini in the heart of the defence was Pat Howard, a teammate of Malcolm MacDonald's at Newcastle. But he had no hesitation in discarding him after he discovered he could buy Willie Young, the big Scottish centre-half, whom he had acquired for Tottenham from Aberdeen. Young was very much his own man and had had his brushes with authority, but he was an honest player with a wholehearted, no-frills approach. He also had an appetite for scoring goals, and one of the abiding memories of Big Willie is his occasional sallies upfield showing off his dribbling skills. The Highbury fans quickly took him to their hearts. After Alan Ball's departure, Terry Neill was in need of an experienced and skillful midfielder to augment the growing influence of the young Liam Brady. The new manager decided to take a major gamble in the spring on Alan Hudson and paid £200,000 to Stoke City for the privilege. Hudson had made something of a name for himself as a playboy at Chelsea, seemingly the foil for Peter Osgood, but he possessed more natural skills than any of the current English-born midfield players. What about Tony Curry? Yet already at the age of 25, he was being classed with Charlie George, Peter Osgood and Stan Bowles as one of the great wasted talents of his day. Just as at Chelsea and Stoke, the Gunners were to be treated with only glimpses of his ability to control a game with vision, accurate passing and support play. The captaincy was given to Pat Rice, a quick and agile fullback who had survived all the upheavals at the club and was a reminder to players such as George, Charlie George and Alan Hudson how enthusiasm and determination can bring a less gifted player out on top. Like Charlie George, Pat Rice had lived within earshot of the North Bank Roar and had been a fan since the age of 10 when his family moved from Belfast to London. His determination was such that Pat Rice was to win international honours with Northern Ireland before he became a first-team regular just prior to the double year, and the Wembley Epic against Liverpool was to be the first of a record 5 FA Cup final appearances. The most memorable was the 1979 meeting with Manchester United, which ended in the dramatic 3-2 win for Arsenal. It gave Pat Rice his second winner's medal and the privilege of lifting the cup even to the ecstatic Arsenal following that day. Pat Rice was a skipper who led by example, and the team soon got right behind him. After finishing his playing career at Watford, he joined the Highbury coaching staff and of course only recently left the coaching staff. The Arsenal style had to be modified to revolve around the direct running of Malcolm MacDonald, and with the help of some stunning goals from him, including hat-tricks against Birmingham City and his old club Newcastle United, Arsenal made steady progress in 76-77 and reached fourth in the table and the fifth round of the FA Cup. But it was a risk to rely on one player so much, and the inevitable happened in February. MacDonald hit a lean patch and the whole team struggled to the extent of an unprecedented 11 First Division games without a win, including 8 successive defeats. The cup run ended with a lacklustre performance at Middlesbrough, where the home team, recently re-established at the top after an absence of 20 years, put 4 goals past Jimmy Rimmer, with Malcolm MacDonald scoring the only reply. Terry Neill's stinging public criticism of his players caused a real rift in the camp. Of course, Arsene Wenger rarely does that kind of thing. And although the Gunners finished a creditable 8th as Liverpool retained their title in Kevin Keegan's farewell season, it was clear that if Terry Neill's valuable groundwork was not to be wasted, he would need a first-class lieutenant to take the bulk of the coaching and act as a buffer. Arsenal were soon to acquire the services of one of the best again, but not before they shared the summer's sensational headlines with Dom Revie. I'm coming near the question now. The England manager who quit for Middle Eastern promise. Arsenal made their front page news on an ill-fated tour of the Far East. When Terry Neill jetted out for the trip, which would take in games in Singapore and a tournament in Australia, he believed he had persuaded the much-respected Dave Sexton to return to Highbury after 10 years. The QPR manager wanted to leave Loftus Road, and Sexton, always happier working with players than tackling managerial tasks, obtained his release and was set for Highbury as first-team coach. But Terry Neill's hopes were dashed by Manchester United, who had just sacked Tommy Docherty after the dramatic treble-busting cup final of 1977. United beat Liverpool, who still won the League and European Cup. A cable to Singapore from his old friend Sexton informed Terry Neill that he had been unable to resist the offer to take over at Old Trafford. Little could they know that as rival managers they would be leading out their teams at Wembley for an FA Cup final in 2 years' time. The tour, which climaxed with games against Red Star Belgrade and Glasgow Celtic in Australia, had not been welcomed by some of the players after a difficult season. So now the question, who were the 2 bad boys of that tour? The games against Celtic and Red Star Belgrade in Australia, I'm not saying they did anything wrong on the pitch, but one of the players was got in a lot of trouble after this and was sold, and I want to know how much and to which club. And now I'm going to give you the answer. The 2 bad boys were the following: Malcolm MacDonald and Alan Hudson. The behaviour of MacDonald and Hudson deteriorated so much that Terry Neill finally wielded the big stick and decided to send them home in shame for drinking and setting a bad example to their younger teammates. They were both fined, suspended and transfer listed on the manager's return, and although MacDonald was to make his peace, it was the beginning of the end for Alan Hudson, who made only 20 more first-team appearances, the last in an FA Cup final, before Terry Neill sold him to Seattle Sounders in the North American League for £95,000. So I'm going to leave it there for this time. Hope you enjoyed it. It's getting late. Time for bed. Till the next time, up the good.